So you went to a recovery thing? How was that? I've never experienced anything like that.
It was cool. The guys there were super nice, but again, so you go around and it was outpatient recovery because so the way Minnesota works is eventually they'll order you to what's called a Rule 25 assessment, and you talk to a chemical use assessor and you tell them all about your drug and alcohol use history. And then they also will talk to the county, they'll talk to your family, they'll talk to your friends, they'll talk to anyone who they can to get a full picture, like just in case you're lying about it. And I had no reason to lie. Like, I was completely honest with that person. One of the things that took so long is because of our family case. All we needed was immunity from the criminal case for shit we said in the family case. And once we got that, like our chemical use assessment happened in the family case and we got immunity for everything we said. It's like, okay, well, I'll go tell them everything. I don't care now. And so you go in and you tell them like your history of drug use and alcohol use, like when the first time you drank was, how often you drank. And I'm like, I drink like 5 drinks a night. They're like, oh my God, are you okay? It was like, I don't know. I think so. Like, did you have any withdrawal when you had to stop drinking? I was like, no. Really? Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I just didn't. Like, I drank a shitload, but it was always on my show. I didn't, like, off my show, I don't really drink. And they go through it and then they diagnose you. They're like, do you have substance use disorder or not? Our chemical assessor did not diagnose us with substance use disorder. Now, people are like, why didn't you just go to rehab or whatever? Like, you can't just go. You have to have a diagnosis because they have a limited number of beds. So I'm sure there's somewhere in like Savannah or like Sedona or whatever where you can go to some retreat that's a drug rehab and you can pay like 20 grand. But in Minnesota, you know, you have to get diagnosed. They didn't diagnose us with substance use disorder. They said, clearly you guys have abused substances, but you don't seem to have an ongoing problem or a recurring problem. We're like, okay, cool. So they sent us to this outpatient recovery treatment. Well, you sit down in there and they're like, what's your name and drug of choice? I'm like, my name is Nick. My drugs of choice are like cocaine, Molly, and ketamine. And like 5 guys look at you go, cool. but then it gets to them and it's like, oh, my name's whatever. It's all confidential, so I don't even want to say a joke name. But my name's whatever. My drug of choice is meth. And then the last guy's like, yeah, fentanyl. And I'm like, holy shit, I would never, ever in my life do meth or an opiate. Like, never. I'm terrified of those things. But like, that's this county. And we had this point where the guardian ad litem, well, I have a lot to say about that. She's walking through her house and she goes, I've never dealt with any case involving cocaine. And she goes, and we do not typically deal with people in y'all's socioeconomic status. I'm like, that's because we're not stabbing people, right? Like, we're not doing anything. We're not dealing. We're not doing anything to harm anyone else. This is just a personal thing that we're doing. And they didn't know what to do with that. But like, it was this big complicating factor. And at some point I'll talk about how they used our kids against us. And I don't mean like our kids, but like the threat of taking them away or the threat of doing things to our kids. It's the grossest shit on the planet that they did. Just because they didn't like what I said online. They actually said that. And then they also didn't like that we hired private counsel and we're resisting the shit we had to, you know, we were being accused of. They're used to people who don't have the ability to hire private counsel. They just take appointed counsel and they just do whatever the county asks. We're like, we just want our kids, like, but you can't do this to us too. And you can't fuck us over in our criminal case by taking statements we say to comply with you in the family case. And so that's another thing the internet like isn't familiar with. And they don't have access to that information. I don't blame them, but like, I had to deal with things in a certain way because they had my kids. Like, they take your children and they're like, oh yeah, by the way, if you fight CAMELOT, there's one time where we had a hearing and they're like, if you fight, they'll take your kids for another 6 months. and they don't need a legal justification for it. They'll just take them, and legal justification will just exist already. They don't need a judge to sign off on it. So if you fight, you won't see your kids for 6 months. Sorry. And so what do you do? Like, how do you fucking deal with
Was
that?
that a bluff, or is that something where you were like,
No, that was real. Like that's a real thing. And again, there's so much more to that story, and I don't want to get too deep into it because we're past that now. That case is over. But like, if people are wondering where I've been, man, these people threatened to take my kids for a minimum of a year if I said or did anything just to defend myself. And since it's the CPS cases are like they're family law, so they're civil, they don't need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. You don't have Fifth Amendment protection. You don't have shit. You don't have any of the stuff that's built into the criminal system to keep you innocent. You are guilty the moment they accuse you because they quote unquote have the interest of your children at heart. And it's really fucking hard for people to understand what that's like. But Kayla and I have poured our entire lives into our children. Entire lives. We have sacrificed so many personal decisions, and we have all of my time right now is basically entirely them. Now I love them. They're hilarious. They're the funniest people I know. I don't mind spending time with them, but like the reality is, like, for my oldest is 17. Prior to him being born, even, we've poured ourselves into these kids. And to then have a government come in and be like, you guys must be terrible because some retards lied about you. And you're like, holy shit. And you can't do anything. They just take them. You have no recourse. And if you try and have recourse, they keep them longer, or they try and take them away permanently. And it's,
so how do you navigate?
You go, what if I lose? You know, like, what if I lose? So eventually you just have to comply.
So is that what leads you to like pleading out, basically?
No, I mean, pleading out is just once my legal defenses were exhausted, the question is, do you go to trial? And don't get me wrong, my case, like, usually you find drugs in a house, it's a pretty simple case, right? But you find drugs in a safe, and that house, you go, oh, wait, there are other people who have full access to that house and that room where the safe is. It's now complicated because they never proved that I know anything about that safe or anything like that. So now they, if we went to trial, they would have to prove that I know what's in the safe, that I know the combination, that it's like my thing, and not maybe someone else who was at the house but got kicked off but is acting like a jilted bitch. Like, maybe there's that. That's what they would have to prove at trial. But you can go fight that and maybe win, maybe lose, or eventually, like, I'm like, can we just get done? Because I don't want to do that. I don't want to sit there and go through that shit. I think it might be funny. It's like interesting as an academic thought, but when it's your life and you go, all I want to do right now is not be here and be here past the goal line so I can move on. So that's what I'm choosing. We've worked out, like I said, we worked out a plea deal. Everything's set to go. And I'm happy with it. And I just want it done, but I have to wait on the court calendar. The court calendar says January 24th.